welcome to Robyn's Reviews. All right, we are now on chapter 4 of A Song for You. We're still on Song for You by Robyn Crawford. Chapter 4 is titled Separation Anxiety. Robyn starts talking about in the summer of 1973, she developed these mysterious swellings in her feet, in her legs, her abdomen. And she said that would happen periodically. She never really knew what was going on. She also talks more about some of the abuse that she witnessed with her father. She also mentions that her mother had her seeing a therapist as a result of witnessing the abuse from her father. So she mentions that here. She talks about college, the summer before she left for college, when she met Whitney, that she would, again, her thing was basketball, so she would, go to the orange projects with some of her teammates from her high school, and they would play the girls in basketball. All right, so she talks about that. She also talks about the difference in relationships with the way she and her mother get along, and then with the way that Whitney and her mother, got along. And she just talks about she didn't understand the relationship with Whitney and her mother. Whitney couldn't talk to her mother, and that, she encouraged Whitney. Whitney said, she won't listen to me. So she made a big point of that. Also, she talked about some of the racism that Whitney experienced as a child. Whitney originally she wanted to go to the Cissy Tyson Community School of Performing Arts. Her mother wanted her to go to Mount St. Dominic, which was mostly white Catholic school. And here, Robyn talks about, some of the racism she had to endure. Whitney it was an overnight that the girls from her school had, spending the night. And one of the father of that particular friend came home and said, "What is this N-word doing in my home?" So Whitney called her mother. Her mother came and picked her up. She also talks about the racism that Whitney experienced from her grandfather, John Russell Houston Sr., who was Whitney's father's father. Okay? And he took, one day, he took all the grandchildren. He promised the grandchildren he was going to take them for ice cream. Then he wound up taking all of the children except Whitney. Who does that? So Whitney explained it to Robyn, that the reason he did that was because Whitney was darker skinned and she didn't have long hair, while her grandfather could pass for white. So, and we both know, there's colorism obviously going on here in the African American community. When she told Robyn when she got home, she told her father what his father had done, and he lambasted him, and he really, got on to him for that. So folks, if we think, we've been talking about some of the reasons why, Whitney used drugs, and folks, you got to go back to some of these things that happened to her when she was younger. These things never leave you. You're scarred for life with some of these things. I mean, that almost brought me to tears. That's heart-wrenching. And then Robyn talks about how, she doesn't know how Nippy graduated from high school. She pretty much, Whitney knew she was going to be a singer, so she was kind of flippant when it came to school because she knew she was going to be a singer, so she was like, yeah, whatever. So she also mentions that, Whitney, of course, she was singing background with Cissy. And again, she mentions Whitney, with her feelings, she couldn't talk to her mother. She was closer to her father, is what she said. She was daddy's girl. And then she mentions that at this time, Whitney's really the only child that's there full-time at the house. And so Cissy and her father arguing, and Whitney felt like she was in the middle of it. And eventually, Mr. Houston, her father, moved out. She also talks about when Whitney would, tell her, she was just tired of everything, basically. And she felt like she was, Whitney felt like she was just being scrutinized more so than her brothers, obviously. And it's sad, Robyn talks about, one particular incident of domestic violence with her mother. I mean, and it's frightening. And so Robyn, I think, tells us this, and that sort of tells us, when she became really close with Whitney, that's why she felt like a protector. This is what Robyn was used to doing. She was doing this with, with her mother, protecting her mother from her father. And it's so heart-wrenching. She mentions when she and her brother Marty went to a summer camp, she didn't want to go. She didn't want to get off the bus. She had the camp people to, call her mom. She wanted to talk to her mom to make sure she was safe, and she told her mother, come and get me. So, these incidences of domestic violence, make sense now that I've read the entire book, obviously, and I see how she protected Whitney. And she was doing this, before she met Whitney. Okay, so she also talks about how, obviously, Robyn was an athlete. So drug use, she said, she had never been a person to use drugs, or put anything bad in her body. But she said when she was with Whitney, she indulged with Whitney. She was just glad to be with Whitney, and Whitney did the drugs, and she did them as well, allegedly. So of course, while they were doing the drugs, she would say, they'd say we can't use cocaine and drugs where we're going, but they continue to use them. So Robyn also mentions this time her mother told her face was shaped like the devil. So obviously the cocaine usage was causing her to really lose weight. She talked about how when they did drugs, Whitney would talk so fast it almost give her a headache. She said Whitney wouldn't stop talking, when she was using drugs. It was just too much. Said, they'd be talking, playing spades, Uno. She said that they'd be reading Bible scriptures as well. So, okay. She also talks about, her sophomore year at Monmouth College. She came home, okay, school was out, and Whitney was going to the prom. Her mother wanted her to go to the prom with some neighbor. His name was Richie. So then Whitney told Robyn, oh, don't worry, Richie's gay. So she went to the prom, and then Robyn describes what she was wearing, and that's pretty much it with the prom issue. Then she also said that, Whitney didn't have a license, so she was, taking Whitney to what they call go-sees, where she'd go do photo shoots. She was also taking Whitney to Sweetwater's. That's a club where her mom would be singing and Whitney would be singing backup. And she talked about her mother coming to one of the clubs, one of the early shows, and she was singing at the table with Cissy Houston, now the Christian, the choir director of the church. Okay. And Robyn's mother said that, Cissy was using the F-bomb, like other people say the words excuse me. And so Robyn's mother was tired of hearing her use the F-bomb, and so she just excused herself. And she said, and she calls herself a woman of God. Go figure. So, Robyn also talked about, she and Whitney talking on the phone all night, and sometimes her mom would just pull the plug, because she'd have the phone with the long cord, and she'd just go get in the bed and put, get up under the covers with the phone. And so she also, ending chapter 4, she just mentions that Whitney, she didn't understand, her mom didn't, understand, why Whitney was the way that she was, even at that early age. And she said that, she noticed Whitney was responsible, her brothers were not. Whitney was respectful, she was polite, had a likable disposition, she was engaging, so that she just didn't know where, why Whitney acted the way she did at that time. Then she also mentions, lastly, one night at Sweetwater's, a man from the music industry praised Whitney, told Robyn and Whitney that they were both beautiful. Cissy turned around, said she whipped her head around and said, no one should be looking at anyone but my kid. Kind of funny, she didn't become your kid till she was really famous, 23 years old, from everything I've read. That's when everyone loved Whitney and wanted to spend time with her. She was their daughter, yeah, when she was famous. All right, so tell me what you think about chapter 4. That's pretty much it. So we're gonna start doing maybe 2 chapters per session, okay? So let me know if you enjoyed the content, and if you did, like, subscribe, leave a comment below. I will respond, okay? Thank you for watching Robyn's Reviews.